to a very special episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm Karen E. Osborne, author of Getting It Right and Tangled Lies, which is a murder mystery, women's fiction, and it's coming out on July 22nd. And today, my guest is somebody whose life resonates so much with me, and I think and her writing, and I think it'll resonate with you. And her name is Janetta Stringfellow. Welcome, Janetta.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're joining us. And so we're going to flip the script a little. Normally, we start with talking about book recommendations. But I wanted to start by you hearing a little bit about Janetta's background, because that feeds right into what she's writing. And if those of you who have read Getting It Right, you know that my themes are all about race and family. What does it mean to be family? About foster care and adoption, about secrets. So when Janetta and I just happened, I've known her for years, but we never had this conversation before. And I thought, oh, we have to share this. We have to share this with everybody. So Janetta, could you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this memoir?
Sure. Absolutely, Karen. Thanks so much. So I never know which mother to start with, but I guess I will start with the mother who gave birth to me. I was born in 1965 in Burlington, Vermont, to a 18-year-old mother who was about to start. Actually, she had to leave her freshman year at Tufts. She was at the then women's school of Tufts University called Jackson. And about halfway through, she had to admit to herself and to her mother that she was pregnant. And she was sent away to a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. She was from Portland, Maine. And I was born there in April of 1965. She had gone to a private high school in Portland and graduated, top of her class, and had gone to the Hampton Institute, which is a historically Black college in Virginia, for a summer program. She is not Black, she is white. Her family came over on the Mayflower. I have the relative is called Henry Sampson. And her mother was very strict. Her father was dead. And she went to the summer program, and there were people there from all over the world. And she sort of had a 6-week or so kind of casual relationship, but a relationship, not just friends, with a Kenyan engineering student who is one of the group of men in the 60s who Kenya sent over along with like Barack Obama's father to get educated in the US and then go back to Kenya with all of the knowledge that they had accrued. So he was a little bit older, and they went out and played tennis and, protested the war and stuff for 6 weeks, and got a little closer than normal on her 18th birthday, I guess. And then by December, as I said, she had to admit that she was pregnant, and she never went back to school after Christmas break. So she went to the home in February. I was born in April. She made up the work of her second semester over the summer and started as a sophomore in the fall. So I was raised by a different mother named Alice. It's funny, my adoptive mother was named Alice Louise, and my biological mother's mother was also named Alice Louise, and they were both from Portland, Maine. I grew up in Cape Elizabeth, which is just south of Portland. If you know Edward Hopper, the lighthouse paintings that he's done, some were on my street, the others were in my town. The most famous one was in my town. It hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There were no Black people in the town. There were no Black people in my school. There were no Black people in my family. So I was actually originally taken in, and I don't really know the details about it, but as a baby by this woman, Alice, and her husband, Louis. But when I was 9 months old, he died of a brain tumor. And then I was raised on my own with my mother. And so I look the way I do. And I was in this town, and my mother had red hair. She was Scottish Canadian, basically. Her parents had immigrated from Prince Edward Island, but were originally from Scotland. And she was also quite a bit older than a typical mother. She was, I think, 54 when I was born.
Mm.
And so sometimes people would ask me if she was my grandmother, and other times people would ask me if I was adopted. And whenever anyone asked if I was adopted, she would just basically scream at them and say, "No, Janetta is my child." And she just would never take, never say anything else. And so I had pictures of her, and there were pictures of her and my dead father up around the house, which were sort of haunting to me. But they were, both like super white. So you don't know anything about genetics as a kid. I didn't know anyone else who looked like me. I had like the Jeffersons, I had Pearl Bailey, maybe someone on Electric Company, but there just weren't any Black people anywhere. And so when you're a kid, you really don't want to be different. So I kind of really wanted my mother to be right, even though like deep down inside, I knew it was wrong. And I don't, I guess I'll just say the N word, but I was called, usually I say it, but I won't because I don't know what what's appropriate on your program. But boys would call me that all the time, and I would go home crying, and my mother would just say, "Oh, they're ignoramuses." Anyway, so she did not work. She threw herself into raising me. I think that she thought that if I was like the smartest, most accomplished kid in the world, it would like overcome my brown skin and curly black hair. So I was thrown into every lesson. I had to take ballet and tap and baton and public speaking and ice skating. I mean, there was just no time to do anything. And a time when the helicopter parent wasn't even a term. She was like the ultimate one. The other mothers, like practiced benign neglect. They were off golfing and smoking and playing bridge. But my mother was just very much about me. And she ended up dying when I was 12 of colon cancer, although she didn't really tell me. She like the only way I knew that she was dying was, she became very ill, but would never say. She just said she had diabetes, and we sold our house in Maine and moved to Western New York to be close to an aunt and uncle. And maybe about a month before she died, she brought me into her bedroom, told me she was going to die, and showed me what she wanted to be buried in. And that was the only conversation we ever had. Although she also said, "Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone."
So this was a woman of secrets, secrets, secrets.
Yeah, a lot of secrets.
Lies.
Mhm. So just, yeah, exactly. And so just, she died about a month after she showed me the light blue suit she wanted to be buried in. And maybe 2 weeks after that, I was living with my Aunt March and Uncle Bill, who I adored and was thoroughly happy to have as my parents. And one night I was like watching Charlie's Angels in our den, and Uncle Bill came in with this like big envelope, this big like yellow envelope, and handed it to me and said, "Do you know your real name is Heather?" And I just looked at him and I said, "No, I didn't know I was adopted." And inside I'm like screaming, like, I know that's a dumb thing to say, right? Like, of course you're adopted. Like, now I've actually done a science project with fruit flies and DNA. Obviously I was adopted, but that's just all I could think of to say. And he apologized and sort of backed out of the room. But I looked at the pieces of paper inside, and I saw my birth name, and I saw my biological mother's name, which I was really lucky that it was there. Lots of people don't have that. And I sort of just put it in the back of my mind for another 20 years. And anyway, that's how I grew up, basically.
Wow. And so 20 years rushes by
Mhm.
within your life.
Mhm.
And then what?
So yeah, I was 12. Yeah. So I, went to college, went to boarding school. Another kind of interesting point was when I went to boarding school, it was in northeastern Ohio. And when I went to interview this really sort of like Renaissance man who ended up performing my wedding ceremony, I became best friends with his son, said to me during the interview, "Do you identify as Black?" And inside I was literally screaming like, "No," but I'm like in this meeting to get into a school and to prove that I'm smart. And so I said yes, thinking that if I said no, he would think it was too stupid to get into the school. And that led me down a whole weird path in boarding school that I got my way out. You know, I was given an advisor who was the only African American adult at the school, and basically he didn't even teach. He was there to advise the kids on a better chance. One of them was Macy Gray, actually, randomly. So that was kind of my next sort of like
Moment. Yeah.
race
Well,
moment growing up.
so did you ever meet your biological mother?
Yeah, sorry, I'll cut back to the chase. 30 or 20 years later, I did. I had a baby of my own. I got married and I had a baby. And, you know, as I was walking around pregnant, I spent a lot of time thinking about how someone walked around pregnant with me and what an intimate thing that was and how strange it was that I didn't know that person. And so I was lucky enough to have her name. And so I was like with my 3-week-old baby on a water ski boat in New Hampshire, and someone said, "Oh, have you heard of this thing called the World Wide Web? You can if you have a computer, you can put like relatives' names in and find out stuff about them." So I gave him this woman's name, and you know, it didn't take very long for me to find her.
And so what was that reunion like?
So I ended up calling her out of the blue. At first I thought, oh, I only want medical information. I don't need a mother. I have my and Uncle Bill. And, but it's just, you know, useful when you're at the doctor to say if you have a history of whatever disease. And I want to be able to give that to my daughter. Also, I was very curious about what I called the non-pun intended black hole of my life. Like, why did I look the way I did? And I did have a birth certificate that said that my mother was white and my father was Negro. And so I ended up calling her out of the blue, long story short. And we talked for about a half an hour on the phone. You know, at first she was shocked. I actually was I had a number that was her office number. And every time I called, I just got a voicemail or an answering machine, as this was 1997. And then one time my daughter was sleeping and I called, and I was in Boston to find her. Had been living in New York at the time, but I called and someone answered the phone. And my whole thing was I was going to ask for this woman's name, and they were going to say, "Oh, I'll go get her." "Oh, a person by that name doesn't work here." And the person who answered the phone said, "This is she." And I hung up the phone because I wasn't prepared for that. And not even 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and I had said to myself, if this woman *69s me, I'll pick up. And so I picked up, and it was her on the other end saying someone at this number just called and then hung up. And I said, "Wow, you *69 me." And she's like, "Yeah, I know, I've never done that before, but something in your voice worried me."
I
And
got
so,
chills.
yeah. And so so we spoke. I said, "My name is Janetta Stringfellow. I've been looking for my mother and my search has led me to you." And she didn't say anything. I said, "Well, I was born in Burlington, Vermont in April 1965. My mother is from Portland, Maine. Does that sound like you?" Silence, silence, silence. Like when you ask someone for a gift, you just like stop talking. I stopped talking, and she eventually said yes. Then I apologized to her like 5 minutes for calling out of the blue. So we started writing letters, and just a couple of months later, I used to come to Boston to get my hair done by someone in Newbury Street because I couldn't find anyone in New York, I guess, to cut curly hair. So I came up to get my hair done, and we met. And pretty much since then, she's just been my mother. Like, I had the best kind of reunion story you could think of, and it was still the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, I pretty much just had immediate acceptance by her and her sisters and my sister and her now husband and his daughter. You know, they're my family and have been for, you know, more than 20 years. And my daughter was 11 months old when I made that first phone call. So she's known them her whole life. So, but again, it was really hard, and I'm really angry, and I wish she hadn't given me away. But she is my mother.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And so many stories. My own daughter's story ended not as happily. So you really are most fortunate.
I am.
It's an incredible story. So you're writing it. You're writing a memoir. Are
I
you going to
am.
write it the whole journey, or how are you thinking about your memoir?
Yeah. So I used to write essays a lot, like, 1,800 word essays that my friends and family really liked. And then I got a job at Harvard and I was able to take classes at the extension school there for free and ended up taking a memoir writing class. And one of the first things my professor told me, and she's the editor of the Harvard Literary Review, and I tend to pay attention to what she says. She's like, an autobiography is like start to finish. A memoir is you have to focus on one thing. So I will say I am kind of going from birth until now, but just with a real focus on race and adoption and my identity. The one line pitch is, am I black or white, and does it matter? And I start out in Skip Gates's office at Harvard. He took a meeting with me really quickly. And I had this dramatic meeting with him where Notre Dame is burning in the background on this literally like 100-inch television screen. And he went around, well, basically he said to me, he's like, you're black. And I'm like, I know, and he's like, listen, when I came in here, I said, who's that black woman waiting for me? So you're black. But anyway, I look into it a little more deeply. And of course I am, but yeah. Anyway, so it's really focused on the race portion of my life.
Yeah. Wow. That just sounds like a memoir we all need to read.
I hope so. That would be great.
So have you always been, when you think about your reading, because one of the
Mhm.
things we do on this show is we recommend books.
Mhm.
Are you a memoir reader, or do you like all kinds of books, or what would you like to recommend today?
Sure. I like all kinds of books. I primarily, I think, like fiction, like literary fiction, but I do have a lot of memoirs that I like, and I do read them. I tend not to read memoirs that are too closely linked to what I'm trying to write because I just find it scary and intimidating. But I love, and when you talk about, are you black or white and doesn't matter, the first person who comes to mind is I love David Sedaris, which is pretty white NPR-y thing to like, right? But I love the way that he writes. And I'm pretty funny in my writing. I'm not too serious about it. And so I really try to, with my own voice. What I like about him is that he has a very distinct voice. You pick up a David Sedaris book, you open it up, you know who you're reading. And that's what I look for in my own voice. I'm currently reading a book for myself and my writing called Unlearning Race, a self-portrait in black and white by Thomas Chatterton Williams. I loved, and I get to go to a writing conference in Italy if we ever travel again, Inheritance by Dani Shapiro. And of course, and if this person had been in power when I was a kid and not Richard Nixon, maybe I wouldn't be struggling with my identity. Michelle Obama, Becoming. If you haven't read it, actually don't read it, listen to the audiobook. Yes. Having Michelle Obama's voice in your head is such a gift.
Yes. There she is.
So I read all sorts of things, but especially during COVID, I'm reading a lot for escape.
Yes, so is a lot of people. Yeah. Well, I am so grateful that you have shared your story. It's a powerful story, and I know your memoir is going to be amazing. And if you ever need a reader along the way, I do a lot of reading of other authors, works in progress, and have been taught well about the kind of responses that are welcomed by writers versus the kind that aren't. So I'm your girl.
That's great to know, Karen. Thank you.
If you want to do a little sharing, but I really appreciate you spending time. And I hope you guys have really enjoyed this conversation with Janetta Stringfellow. And I'll keep you posted about how her book is progressing and when you might be able to find it. Thanks so much for listening.